Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something that set the internet on fire recently. A very public figure, a very carefully managed image, and one decision that just sparked instant controversy.
Yeah, we're talking about Meghan Markle's appearance October 5th at Paris Fashion Week, specifically sitting front row at a Balenciaga show. And this isn't really just about a dress or a designer, is it?
Not at all. It feels like it's about strategy, maybe risk, maybe even a misstep. Our goal here is to try and unpack the thinking behind it. Why align with a brand that's, well, still pretty radioactive after that huge scandal?
Exactly. Especially for someone who's built a platform around, certain moral causes. The sources we looked at immediately framed this as shocking. It seemed like a direct contradiction.
Visceral is a good word for the reaction. It wasn't just fashion critics. It felt like it hit a nerve much deeper than that.
It really did. It became less about the fashion show itself and more about hypocrisy, accountability. The question that just kept popping up everywhere was, how can someone championing vulnerable voices publicly link themselves to that brand, given its recent history?
Right. It put her credibility, as the sources say, straight into the court of public opinion.
Instantly. No grace period.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit for anyone who needs a refresher. Why is Balenciaga still seen as, toxic by so many? We need to touch on that 2022 scandal to really get the current backlash.
Absolutely. So the 2022 ad campaign wasn't just pushing boundaries. It really trampled over some deeply held lines for a lot of people globally.
What was the core issue again?
It involved children photographed with teddy bears. But these teddy bears were dressed in, like, bondage-inspired outfits, harnesses, studs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember the images. Very unsettling.
Exactly. And the public reaction wasn't just criticism, it was genuine outrage. People saw it as deeply inappropriate, potentially exploitative, using minors in contexts that felt disturbing or suggestive.
And the sources really emphasized that people didn't just see it as a mistake, like a creative idea gone wrong. Many felt it was deliberately provocative, using shock value involving kids.
Right. And Balenciaga, well, they tried to manage it. They pulled the ads. They issued apologies. They even filed this lawsuit against the production company, which felt a bit like shifting blame, and then they dropped it anyway.
That was too late.
Oh, yeah. The damage was done. That association, that sort of moral stain related to exploiting children's imagery, it just stuck to the brand in the public mind. Hard to erase that.
Okay, so that context is crucial because her own brand, Meghan's brand, is so heavily focused on protecting children, advocating for dignity. That's the direct collision course here.
Precisely. The critics didn't need to dig deep to find the conflict. It was right there on the surface. Her past advocacy basically became the measuring stick for this action.
And when you build your platform on that moral high ground.
The fall feels much harder when there's a perceived compromise.
Yeah.
Her own words, her past campaigns were used immediately against her.
The online reaction sounds like it was brutal. The sources mentioned specific things people were saying.
Oh, absolutely. Very direct. Questions like, how can any mother support that brand?
Yeah.
That one came up a lot. And then that label that just seemed to catch fire.
The Duchess of Hypocrisy.
Yeah, that's the one. Devastatingly effective because it's so concise. It sums up the perceived betrayal instantly. It wasn't just she attended a show. It was framed as she's actively endorsing this.
Like she was, as one source put it, delighting the very brand she should have distanced from.
Exactly. It suggests a real disconnect, or worse, a deliberate ignoring of her own stated principles.
But hang on, was there another side to this presented in the commentary? Any alternative explanation floating around besides just, hypocrisy?
There was. And this is where it gets into potential strategy versus just oversight. The main counterargument that surfaced, often attributed to her team or supporters, was the loyalty angle.
Loyalty to who?
To a friend. Specifically, the new creative director at Balenciaga. The narrative pushed was that her attendance wasn't about endorsing the brand's past, but about showing personal support for this individual stepping into a difficult role.
Ah, okay. So supporting the person in their new beginning, trying to separate that from the brand's baggage.
That seems to be the idea. She made it very public, too, posted on social media afterwards, thanking Balenciaga, thanking the team, mentioning affection and alliance. It wasn't like she was trying to sneak in. It was a deliberate public signal.
But here's the rub, right? And the sources really hammer this point. Can personal loyalty actually outweigh that kind of public controversy, especially when your own brand is built on moral advocacy? Do people buy it?
Largely, it seems not. For the broader public, for the critics quoted in our sources,
Yeah.
that personal friendship just wasn't enough justification. It didn't nullify the brand's history.
So the narrative stuck. She wasn't just at a show, she was, like you said, choosing a side.
Right. Choosing a side in a debate about whether a brand with that history deserves that kind of high-profile validation. And crucially, choosing a side that seemed to undermine her own platform.
It's fascinating how even the fashion itself then got pulled into the crossfire. It wasn't just about the act of being there.
No, absolutely. When you become a lightning rod, everything gets scrutinized through that lens. Her outfit, this sort of dramatic, flowing white cape, monochrome look.
Yeah, I saw pictures. Quite striking.
Striking, yeah, but the commentary immediately split. Some people mocked it, calling it bed sheets.
Hmm.
Others might have normally praised its minimal sophistication. But here,
Here it got tangled up in the controversy.
completely, you couldn't separate the style from the substance of why she was there, wearing that brand. The clothes became symbolic of the whole messy situation. People judged the look based on the label and the moral questions around it.
So she makes this move, maybe intended as loyalty, maybe something else, and bam, immediate fallout. The old scandal gets dredged up again with, as the sources say, renewed urgency. Her presence basically gave it new legs.
And the accusations became really pointed, focusing squarely on that perceived contradiction. You built your whole public identity advocating for kids, and now this. Or you talk about defending the vulnerable, but here you are aligning with a brand associated with moral gray zones at best.
It's a direct challenge to her core message, which leads us to where things stand now. The sources mention this defiant silence. Is that the strategy? Just wait it out.
Well, that seems to be the approach so far, and it's a risky one. When you're facing accusations of hypocrisy, silence can often be interpreted as, well, having no good answer. Or worse, indifference.
So what are the potential plays here? If silence isn't working, what could she do?
It's a major PR crossroads. Option 1. Address it directly. Issue some kind of statement. Try to explain the decision. Frame it carefully. Perhaps emphasizing the supporting a friend new heir angle while acknowledging the past issues.
But that's tricky. You risk sounding like you're making excuses.
And you risk alienating supporters who want a harder line, right?
Exactly. They might see any explanation short of condemnation as insufficient. Option 2 is much bolder.
Which is?
Try to reframe the whole thing, lean into it almost. Argue that attending signals a belief in redemption, that brands and people shouldn't be permanently blacklisted for past mistakes, especially if they're trying to change.
Wow, that's a high wire act.
Extremely high wire, because the risk there is enormous. You could easily be seen as minimizing the original offense, the 2022 scandal itself. And given her advocacy work, that could be incredibly damaging, a huge gamble. So for you listening, what's the takeaway here? It feels like every public move these figures make tells a story, maybe not the one they intend. This appearance wasn't just about fashion. It peeled back layers on alliances, brand strategy, and maybe the limits of a platform built on moral claims.
Yeah, the sources are pretty clear. This is a major test of her credibility, possibly the fiercest yet. What she says or does next or continues not to say could really define how people see her going forward. Does that Duchess of Hypocrisy label stick?
It really feels like the stakes are incredibly high now. Was this a calculated risk for loyalty that she felt was worth the price, or was it just a fundamental misread of the public mood and her own brand's foundation?
And that brings us to our final thought for you to consider. If your entire public persona is built on being vocal, on advocating, on showing vulnerability, what happens when you choose silence in the face of a direct moral challenge like this? What's the long-term damage? The sources suggest this backlash might be really hard to undo. It makes you ask, is any act of loyalty, however personal, worth risking that core moral association in the public's eyes? Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.